The topic assigned to my group is all about virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is a philosophy developed by Aristotle and other ancient Greeks. Virtue ethics quest to understand and live a life of moral character. This character-based approach to morality assumes that we acquire virtue through practice. Ang pangunahing tumatalakay sa katapatan at moralidad ng isang tao. Nakasaad dito na ang pagsasagawa ng mabubuting gawi tulad ng katapatan, pagiging bukas palad ay gumagawa ng isang moral at banal na tao. By practicing being honest, brave, just, generous, and so on, a person develops an honorable and moral character. Good day, everyone. I am Eliza Mirilos Baños. On behalf of my group mates, I hope that you are all having a great day. To illustrate the difference among three key moral philosophies are utilitarianism, deontology, and the virtue ethics. Mark White and Robert R. Sila yung co-editor ng film na The Dark Knight, where Batman has the opportunity to kill the Joker. Pag utilitarianism or utilitarians, White and Arp suggest would endorse killing the Joker. By taking this one life, Batman could save multitude. So, yung report ka ng Group 1, which is about utilitarianism, ang concept nun is, in order to save many lives, they sacrifice the life of one person. Kumbaga, para masagip mo yung buhay ng nakararami, papatay siya ng isa. So, deontologists on the other hand would reject killing the Joker simply because it's wrong to kill. Kumbaga, andun yung thought na maling pumatay or masamang pumatay. But a virtue ethicist would highlight the character of the person who kills the Joker. So, may question na, does Batman want to be the kind of person who takes his enemies' lives? No, in fact, he doesn't. So, virtue ethics help us to understand what it means to be a virtuous human being. And it gives us a guide for living life without giving us specific rules for resolving ethical dilemmas.
Origins of virtue ethics. The theory of virtue ethics originates in ancient Greece. True, some connections can be drawn as far back as ancient China. In ancient Greece, virtue ethics is likely the most ancient ethical theory. It defines morally good behavior as displaying virtues like courage, loyalty, or wisdom. In Greek, virtue, arete, means excellence. Socrates once claimed it's the greatest good for a man to discuss virtue all day, on the grounds that the unexamined life is not worth living. The Apology. Socrates discovered that his fellow citizens neglected their souls in favor of wealth, reputation, and bodies. He thought God had sent him to study his fellow residents and persuade them that the soul's health was the most crucial aspect of human health.
Virtue and happiness. The Greeks and all subsequent virtue theorists, the greatest human good is the aim of action, gladness, or eudaimonia. Seeing human happiness as the pinnacle of what it means to be human, possessing human nature, this is a form of thriving good health or happiness of the soul or mind. While contentment appears to be the personal thing, the concept of human flourish implies a goal, the idea of happiness, considered an analogy with health. One becomes good or excellent by virtue, and as a result, it is a way for us to find happiness.
Socrates or Plato's theory of virtue. Virtue is supposed to be a kind of knowledge. It is identified with wisdom. Wisdom is both necessary and sufficient for virtue. Knowledge about virtue is somehow analogous to mathematical knowledge. Both kinds of knowledge are the result of a self-reflective process called recollection. In early Plato, Socrates advances two theses regarding virtue. He suggests that virtue is a kind of knowledge similar to the expertise involved in a craft. And he suggests that the five virtues, wisdom, temperance, courage, justice, and piety, form a unity. On this interpretation, each virtue is knowledge of a different kind, and the virtues form a unity because they are inseparable. If one has possession of one of the virtues, she will necessarily possess them all. The identity interpretation understands Socrates to hold that the virtues are one and the same thing, expert knowledge of good and bad.
Here are some problems of knowledge based on Aristotle. Since virtue concerns action, it is possible to act well without knowing how to act well. Tinutukoy nito na ang mabubuting kilos bilang pagpapakita ng mabubuting katangian tulad ng katapangan, katapatan, or karunungan. Ang isang virtud mismo ay isang disposisyon na kumilos sa pag-iisip at pakiramdam ng ilang mga paraan. As long as someone has the right belief about which actions are good, he or she will act virtuously. Next, but belief without knowledge is unstable and fleeting. Kumbaga, sa paniniwala, dapat yung paniniwalaan mo is meron kang proof or tama siya or reliable yung nakuhaan mo na source para hindi magiging confusing sa ibang tao. This is why it is necessary to have not just true belief but knowledge which is justified through beliefs. Practical wisdom or prudence. With Aristotle, we distinguish the kind of wisdom necessary for ethical action from wisdom in the sciences. Next, the wisdom necessary for action is practical wisdom, or good moral judgment. Aquinas calls this prudence or prudentia. Judgment applies to a range of different situations, which is why it requires experience to acquire. Good judgment enables a person to make the right sort of decision in the right kind of circumstances at the right time.
Intellectual and moral virtues. Aristotle and Aquinas distinguish between intellectual and moral virtues. The first one is intellectual virtues can be taught formally. They involve knowledge and understanding of causes and ends, the why and how. Examples: theoretical wisdom, scientific knowledge, insight or understanding, technical skill or art, and practical wisdom. This is because while an intellectual virtue of the art of carpentry may be perfected without being right used towards the good, prudence cannot, since prudence is not right reason about exterior things to be made but right reason about the things to be done. The virtue of prudence is an act in which love is necessary for its perfection. Therefore, the moral virtues must be involved. The second one is moral virtues can only be acquired through practice and experience. They involve acquiring habits of character and have to do with the appropriate management of emotions. Examples: temperature or moderation, justice, courage or fortitude, generosity, friendliness, wittiness, truthfulness, and etc. Now, moral virtues cannot be without some of the intellectual virtues since they have to do reasoned right use of habits. Moral virtues do not need wisdom, science, or art, but they do need understanding and prudence. This is because prudence straddles both power, since it is formally an intellectual virtue as it is about right reason, but it is materially a moral virtue because it is about right reasoning applied to action.
Virtue and character. Number 1. Having a virtuous character is necessary to be virtue. Number 2. Character is a deeply ingrained tendency or habit to behave a specific manner. Number 3. A virtuous character must precede virtuous conduct as opposed to some external force. Number 4. The good person acts in a virtuous manner because they wish to. Number 5. Dispositions or character qualities should be interpreted flexibly so that a moral person acts morally in a variety of circumstances. Number 6. An honest person, for instance, tells the truth, honors agreements, abides by the law, and doesn't misrepresent who they are. Number 7. And the honest person does this out of a preference for being honest, not out of a desire to avoid negative consequences. And number 8. Because of this, it is unwise to judge someone's virtue based on just one or two.
Habit. How to acquire virtue. How does a person acquire virtues? Virtues are acquired through learning and practice. With respect to the moral virtues, Aristotle thinks we learn by doing. Virtue requires discipline and practice. Repeated virtuous actions help to ingrain the character traits or dispositions that make a person virtuous. Virtue actions include honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, integrity, fairness, self-control, and prudence. Making virtuous decisions requires good moral judgment or reason. So, there is an essential rational component as well.
An analogy. One of the easiest ways to think of how to acquire moral character is by comparing it to skills like the ability to play a sport or musical instrument. For example, a person who practices hard and trains her body acquires the skill to be able to do that skill well. Next is the skilled athlete or musician is also the one who is better able to practice, reinforce her skill. Next is the skilled athlete or musician actually physically changes his or her body through repetitious actions. And lastly, in the same way, the virtuous person finds it easier to act virtuously. She actually changes her physical and emotional characteristics. Skill analogy should not be understood as proposing that being virtuous is analogous to possessing a practical skill, but rather as proposing that being virtuous is analogous to being a good occupant of a skill-involving role.
Character and the will. Aquinas or Thomas Aquinas emphasizes the importance of will in his account of the moral virtues. For Aquinas, even if a person has the right characteristic and it is inclined by nature to do the right thing, that person still has a choice either to follow commands or of reason or not. Ang individual, kalooban ng tao ay tama kapag ito ay umaayon sa banal na kalooban. Ang banal na kalooban, ang pinakahuling tagapagbigay ng batas, itinakda ng Diyos ang tama at mali, mabuti at masama. Nang likhain ng Diyos ang mundo, kaya ang hindi pagsunod sa kalooban ng Diyos ay paglabag sa natural na batas.
Supernatural grace and beatific vision. Aquinas acknowledges Aristotle's claim that virtue results in despite the fact that he views this as an insufficient, normal, or happiness in human form. There is no such thing as complete and perfect happiness. In this, for Aquinas, life is the divine vision in its entirety, joining the divine in thought, seeing God in God's essence. As God's true essence cannot be perceived by the senses, this kind of joyful happiness is not attainable as long as our intellect is embodied and based on the senses. Furthermore, without God's mercy, humans are unable to reach this perfection. Thus, since the divine intervention is necessary, humanity's ultimate goal or purpose is supernatural.
So next is Aristotle's Ethics, 384 to 322 BC or before Christ. 323 kasi yung death niya. Si Aristotle ay may isang book, The Nicomachean Ethics. So, ano nga ba yung meaning ng Nicomachean Ethics based kay Aristotle? It emphasizes how spiritual growth can be achieved only by working on yourself every day, and how the process never really ends, although you become self-actualized on the way. So, anong pinaka-main argument ni Aristotle dun sa Nicomachean Ethics? Ethics aims at the achievement of excellence because this excellence produces happiness to the human soul. And this is fundamentally good because happiness is our end and the goal that all human actions attempt to embody through the action self. So, anong kiniklaim ni Aristotle? Aristotle's claim that virtue can be learned only through constant practice implies that there are no set rules we can learn and then obey. Instead, virtue consists of learning through experience what is the mean path relative to ourselves between the vices we may be liable to stumble into. Based on kay Aristotle, merong two kinds of persons. First one is the continent. Do what is right but not necessarily because they want to. Second one is the temperate. Do what is right because they want to. The more holistic person.
The goal of human existence, eudaimonia. It is not simple to figure out the ultimate purpose of human existence, but probably the greatest response is that eudaimonia, or happiness, is what people should strive for. Flourishing and happiness. A lifelong pursuit accomplished rationally through theoretical wisdom and contemplation. Theoretical wisdom involves thinking about or doing something intended to achieve the truth. With its individuality, contemplation is the most reliable and stable. Functionally, through practical wisdom and politics. Knowing what is good, correct, or best under certain conditions is the definition of practical wisdom.
The goal of human existence and eudaimonia. Aim at the perfect happiness, which is the perfect activity. An excellence in any activity in accordance with the nature of that activity. Thus, human happiness is the activity of the soul in accordance with perfect virtue. Eudaimonia requires intellectual contemplation in order to meet our rational capacities. To answer Aristotle's question of what is the ultimate purpose of human existence is not a simple task. But perhaps the best answer is that the ultimate goal for human beings is to strive for eudaimonia, or happiness.
The virtues. Intellectual virtues are wisdom, understanding, prudence, thought through instruction. Moral virtues are prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, the result of habit, not natural or inborn but acquired through practice, habit, or disposition of the soul. Our fundamental character, which involves both feeling and action.
The doctrine of the mean. The mean doctrine of Aristotle offers a method that enables the person to make decisions guided by a condition of character developed through virtuous habits. Proper position between two extremes, vice of excess and vice of deficiency. Rashness is a vice that develops from excess. For example, if we have excess, we will never drink. If we have the vice of deficiency, we will be impatient. Cowardice is a vice that causes deficiencies. For example, people are unwilling to risk even one hair on their head, even when something very important is at stake. Not an arithmetic median, relative to us, and not the thing, not the same for all of us, any of us at various occasions. In this way, Then, every knowledgeable person avoids excess and deficiency, but looks for the mean and chooses it.
Virtues and the mean. Define through reason, education, contemplation, and reflection. Balanced with other virtues and applied using pronesis. To have any single strength of character in full measure, a person must have the other ones as well. Virtues lies in a mean, because the right response to each situation is neither too much nor too little. Virtue is the appropriate response to different situations and different agents. The virtues are associated with feelings. For example, courage is associated with fear, modesty is associated with the feeling of shame, and friendliness associated with feelings about social conduct. The virtue lies in the mean because it involves displaying the mean amount of emotion, where mean stands for appropriate.
Virtues and community. Number 1. Virtues are defined and lived in community. Number 2. Sharing a common identity and story. Number 3. Modeling the virtues. Importance of moral exemplars, saints, and heroes. Number 4. Practicing the virtues. Habit is crucial. Number 5. Reinforcing the virtues.
GEM Elizabeth Anscombe. In 1958, she published an article called Modern Moral Philosophy, arguing that we should return to the virtues as the idea of a law without a lawgiver was incoherent. Anscombe says it is possible to do ethics without employing ideas like moral oath or moral obligation, with Aristotelian ethics as the best illustration.
Other virtue ethicists. Alasdair MacIntyre. Alasdair MacIntyre is a Scottish-American philosopher who has contributed to moral and political philosophy as well as history of philosophy and theology. MacIntyre's After Virtue is one of the most important works of Anglophone moral and political philosophy in the 20th century. So, after virtue, what is the main idea of after virtue? Virtue and conflict are mutually incompatible and exclusive based kay MacIntyre, and thus that there cannot be rival goods at war with each other. So, anong pinaka-summary ng After Virtue? A Study in Moral Theory is a book on moral philosophy by the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre. It provides a bleak view of the state of modern moral discourse, regarding it as failing to be rational and failing to admit to being irrational. But importance of narrative as a life tradition based kay Alasdair MacIntyre, you need to know where ethics has come from. And he stated that virtues changes over time.
Philippa Foot tries to modernize Aristotle. Ethics should not be about dry theorizing, but about marking the world a better place. Virtue contributes to the good life. Foot believes that moral considerations, such as those of justice and charity, are on part with self-interest and desire fulfillment. She also believes that there are considerations of family and friendship that provide a separate category of reasons for action.
Lyndhurst House. A neo-Aristotelian, Aristotle was wrong on women and slaves, and there is no need to be limited to his list of virtues. We acquired virtues individually and so flourish, but we do so together and not at each other's expense.
Other virtue ethicists. Carol Gilligan. Carol Gilligan is an American feminist, ethicist, and psychologist best known for her work on ethical community and ethical relationships. there is one book by Carl Gilligan's The Different Voice, which is refers to take account of both men and women. She strives to emphasize that women, like men, are capable of thinking and acting in a manner associated with justice, and women with elements more associated with the value of care. A value or an ethics of care based on Carl Gilligan's directs our attention to the need for responsiveness in relationships, or paying attention, listening, or responding, and to the cost of losing connection with oneself or with others. Its logic is inductive, contextual, psychological rather than deductive or mathematical.
Michael Sloat develops the feminist ethics of care and links it to a virtue ethics inspired more by Hume and Hutcheson's moral sentimentalism than by Aristotle. Sloat defends balanced caring as an admirable character trait. He believes that caring more for intimates than others is admirable.
Martha Nussbaum. She interprets Aristotle's views as absolutes, justice, temperance, generosity, etc., are essential to human flourishing in all societies and in all times. According to Nussbaum, informed desires basis for the capabilities approach cannot be any desires other than those that improve quality of life. For example, while education can help people develop their capacity for practical reasons, they shouldn't use it to put more pressure on others.
Of virtue ethics. Number 1. Importance of the person, motive, heart, and conscience. Number 2. Connection to community. Number 3. Realization that morality is not defined by moments but by a long-term process. Number 4. Allowance for gray areas, varying contexts, different levels of moral maturity, and life context.
Weaknesses of virtue ethics. Number 1. Dependence on strong communities. Number 2. Not easily applied to ethical issues or to give us practical solutions. Third one is demands time. The fourth one is can be turned into a really poor duty-based ethics. The last one is might be taken as situational ethics.
We acquire virtue. Number 1. Practice wisdom. Number 2. The more we develop a virtuous character and acquire practical wisdom. Number 3. Good actions from good character. Number 4. Good character is essential to human happiness.
Virtue and habit. For Aristotle, virtue is something that is practiced and thereby learned. It is habit. This has clear implications for moral education. For Aristotle, obviously, things that you can teach people to be virtuous. Last one is role models become very important.
Virtue as the golden mean. Aristotle says virtue involves finding the proper balance between two extremes. The first one is excess, having too much of something, and second, deficiency, having too little of something. Not mediocrity but harmony and balance. The mean varies from person to person. And lastly, there are many ways of behaving and thus many ways to be happy. The golden mean is a tool to gauge where virtue falls between two vices, excess and deficiency. Aristotle described ethical virtue as a disposition, that is, a tendency induced by our habits to have feelings apropos to a given situation.
The last one, a virtuous life means balance. One of the main ideas of Aristotle's teachings is the idea of finding balance. Aristotle argued that all virtue in life is achieved by maintaining the golden mean. Take one of the cardinal virtues away, then what happens? This means that in order to find happiness, people should always strive for a balance between two extremes.